So, Grayson, what steps do you believe are necessary to gain broader attention for the opioid epidemic?
I started the Hope Project, which is something that was inspired by my sister Kinsley's story last year. We lost her to addiction, and she battled for 15 years. The Hope Project at a young age was something that I really wanted to step into because I wanted to be a voice for her.
I will continue to do exactly what I've been doing. By standing on this stage tonight, I'm breaking a barrier and I'm speaking about something that no one would ever expect me to speak about in the clothes that I'm wearing, in the position that I'm in, and the title that I have.
All I could think about is my sister's gonna die, my mom's gonna get this call, and it's gonna be worse than I could have ever imagined. I didn't want to be accepting of the fact that my sister was now a drug addict. I want to change the way that addiction is viewed. I want people to know that they are safe in our country and for our laws to reflect that. And so none of this would have been possible. I don't know that I would ever be here today if I wouldn't have gone through the things that my life has presented me with, because now I want to make that change. I don't want anyone else to go through these things, but if I'd never seen them, I wouldn't know they were there, and I wouldn't know that I wanted to make a difference.
And I will continue to do that across every corner of our state, walking in, breaking stigma, and proving that this is not moral failure, but addiction is a disease, and we must pair it with hope.
Grayson Johnson, Miss Johnston County.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Living on Incline, sponsored by Recovery Alive and hosted by, me, John Eklund, licensed clinical social worker, ordained pastor, and founder of Recovery Alive. Now, on this podcast, you are going to be challenged to push past limits of mediocrity and all the toxic mindsets that have you stuck. Living on Incline is an invitation to fully explore your God-given potential with reckless abandon. We have a misery back guarantee on this podcast where settling is never an option, suffering is part of growth, and life change is guaranteed, or your misery back. The first day of the rest of your life starts right now. Hey everybody, John Eklund here, Living on Incline podcast, where we explore people's potential, explore human potential. I'm really curious about that, inviting guests here who are growing, they're living on incline, facing challenges every day, and finding out through suffering and struggles what they're capable of. They're incredible people who have done incredible things through very difficult circumstances. And Grayson Johnson is with us. She is just somebody who has taken on the challenge of the recovery platform, and we're going to learn about why that is. And she's a friend of our Recovery Alive sponsor, and so glad that you decided to join us. Thank you, Grayson, for being here.
Yes,
would you introduce
John,
yourself
for having
and
me.
just tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and how we connected and how we know about you in the first place?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Grayson Johnson, and I actually got involved with Recovery Alive. It's been several years ago, almost 7 or 8 in
Was it really?
2018. Yeah.
Okay.
So my first involvement was actually the 5K.
I had no idea.
Yes. But that was around the time that I started the Hope Project, which is something that was inspired by my sister Kinsley's story last year. We lost her to addiction, and she battled for 15 years. And so the Hope Project, at a young age was something that I really wanted to step into because I wanted to be a voice for her. But like I said, that was 7 or 8 years ago. So there's been a lot of growth and change for me personally since then. When I first started this initiative, it was something new. I was young. I was a teenager. I just didn't quite grasp the concept
How old
completely.
were you when you started it?
14.
You were 14 when you started the Hope Project?
Yes, I was.
So what inspired you then to get started on this Hope Project?
Well, actually, that's when my involvement with the Miss America opportunity began.
Okay.
And so, long story short, the first year I competed, we're all required to have a community service initiative, a platform. And that's something really hard at 14 and 15
Right.
to, say, this is what I want to advocate for.
Yeah.
And my life had brought several struggles, but at that point in my life, I thought, you have to put on a pretty face. You have to put on a smile. You can't go out and share, all of this bad that goes on behind the scenes. You need to show the positive. So
that's what, did you grow up with that? Is that part of just kind of your culture? Like, put on a brave face, don't talk about your struggles. We're Southern folks, Johnston County, North Carolina. Did you grow up in church?
I did.
Had a church background?
I really think it's coming from a small town.
Yeah.
Society tells you, your community tells you, don't share those
Don't
things.
talk about your stuff.
Family, friends. I thought my friends lived perfect lives all through school. I had no idea that anyone went through a struggle. I thought that I was the only one internally facing these things. And so that first year when I was tasked with finding a platform, I struggled with a skin disease called vitiligo. And so I was like, let's just do something that everybody can kind of relate to. It was called Love the Skin You're In. Just confidence, being your best self.
Yeah.
And that next year, I realized that it was time for me to step out of that boundary and do something about the struggle that I was facing. And not only the way that my sister's addiction was affecting me, but the way it was affecting her. And she just didn't have a voice to make a change.
So talk about that, if you don't mind, a little bit. Like, when did you start to realize, as a young person, that your sister was going through an addiction crisis? Can you talk about growing up a little bit and what your home life looked like?
Right. So when I was in kindergarten, I was 5 or 6 years old when my sister left our house one day. And I didn't understand at that age, which you don't expect a child to understand, why she was leaving.
Yeah.
But she was a senior in high school. That's when your biggest dreams are supposed to come true. You're supposed to go off to college, start your life, gain your independence. But instead, she made a choice to try a drug for the first time. And when she made that choice, she didn't realize, but that was going to take over her life. It was going to consume her.
And you're 5 or 6 years old when this is happening?
Yes.
Is she your big sister? Look up to her?
Yeah,
or?
she's my big sister. I remember I would steal her, funny story, but I used to steal her shoes and wear them to school every day. My mom, I'd ask her every morning, can I wear Kinsley's shoes to school? And she'd say no, but I just idolized everything that she did. She was almost everything that I wasn't. She was brave. She wasn't scared of a thing. I remember her pulling a trampoline up to the side of our house one day when my mom left me home with her, and she was so fearless, she would jump off the roof onto the trampoline. And those are things I would never do, but I admired her for her bravery. She wasn't scared of anything, and I knew that no matter what it was, Kinsley was going to face it head on. And so to be stripped of almost my innocence at that age, because now a young girl who idolized my sister, I loved my sister, like she was my role model, for her to just be stripped of me, honestly left me so confused. And like I said earlier, I didn't realize that that wasn't normal. I didn't realize that other siblings didn't have to go through that.
At that age, did you have an explanation of why she left the house? Did you kind of have like this moment where your folks said, hey, here's what's going on with your sister? How did you find out what was happening, and how did you wrap your head around that at that age?
Right. Well, she went to live with my grandmother. And so I just thought it was one of those things like, hey, she's grown. We've always stayed with my grandma. And so I was like, okay, maybe she just wants a change. And I didn't really understand it until a few years later, when she started recovery programs.
Okay.
And my mom and I would go and visit. And that's kind of when I started to grasp that idea. Yeah. But for a while, I still struggled. I didn't want to be accepting of the fact that my sister was now a drug addict, because that meant that I'd kind of have to break that barrier in society when I talked about it. Because like I said earlier, it's just not something that people seemed accepting of. It wasn't something you heard of.
Did your family talk about it? Did you have opportunities to talk about it with counselors? Was there opportunities for you to kind of share your frustrations and struggles, or was it kind of a little bit kept on the down low?
Kind of swept under the rug,
Yeah.
which is something looking back, I wish, my mom has always been a protector and tried to shield us from the bad in the
Right.
world. But I think now looking back, the world is only as bad as we allow it to be.
Mm,
And
that's
so
good.
if we don't talk about these things, then we don't really have the chance to recover properly.
Yeah, and I think when you're a kid too, right? You have to fill in what they're not telling you.
Absolutely.
So I always, when I do counseling with kids and, and talking to parents, I'm saying they're going to come up with their own theory of what's happening. And usually it's way worse than what's actually going on. They have to
Absolutely.
assume a bunch of stuff. They have to fill those gaps. Kids are way smarter than we give them credit for. So they know something's happening. And if they don't get that information, if we don't have those honest conversations with them, they're going to come up with their own theory. They got to fill in those gaps.
Right. And I remember, as a kid, we still had communication with Kinsley, and I was still able to see her a bit more. But as the years passed, I would lay in my bed every single night, and I had filled my head with those stories.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to expect because I had been shielded from so much. And I didn't have a friend to talk to about it because that is a very, at the time I thought a very niche thing to happen to me. And so I remember one night my mom getting a phone call, and I had just laid down to go to sleep for school the next day, and I heard my mom start screaming, yelling, and crying. And that is something that has stuck with me forever. For years, that's the only image, that's the only sound I could think of in my head when I went to go to sleep. And all I could think about is my sister's going to die. My mom's going to get this call, and it's going to be worse than I could have ever imagined. And that's not something that's ever gone away. But I think one of the biggest things, and I have talked to my mom about this, is if I would have known, if she would have at least told me a little bit, those aren't things that would have left trauma on me every single day.
Yeah. The unknown.
Right.
Just having no idea what's happening. Your mom's going through God knows what with a daughter who's in addiction. So she may not know how to talk about it. She doesn't know what's going on. And so how old were you when that phone call came that you're talking about, that you have this kind of memory that's just drilled into your head?
9 or 10, so still relatively young.
And what explanation were you given? What happened?
Honestly, it was all a blur for me. I remember hopping up, I ran in, and I've always been one to conceal my emotions. I've not been the emotional person. I wasn't the kid to ask too many questions.
You think that was a product of what was going on with your sister?
Absolutely. And still to this day, I grieve a lot different than, let's say, my mom does or the rest of my family, because I just try to take things head on, keep a smile on my face. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Grief looks different for everybody, but I definitely think it's a product of just trying to hold it together, because there were so many things behind the scenes that I couldn't control, and I didn't know a lot about, but I knew that I could control the way that I mentally took on things and the way that I presented myself in the face of so much chaos.
You
And
probably had to
so
grow
much
up
grief.
pretty
Right.
fast. You had to grow up pretty fast, be kind of a support, probably, in a way. Even, I mean, we've seen this really with a lot of kids who are in that scenario where they have a sibling who's kind of the problem child, the one who's going through the black sheep or whatever, is that you end up kind of being in a place where, like, I don't want to put more on mom. I don't want to, stir the pot anymore. I want to be supportive. And so you almost become almost like a parent, or at least somebody who's not going to cause a lot of trouble. I just can imagine how that impacted you as you were growing up to a place where you're like, how do I And I know you, and I have spent a little time with your mom, and just going like, how do I love my mom? How do I not put any more junk on her? Do you remember that early? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that part of your process? Is going like, my mom's got a lot going on. I don't want to be another problem for her.
Absolutely. And this is another kind of bounce off of that. I remember most kids, you go into the store and your mom says, pick out a toy or pick out anything, we'll buy it. I remember my mom doing that for me, and I picked out a chore chart. What kid picks out a chore chart? But that was me, because I just wanted structure and I wanted stability.
Yeah.
And
I felt safe.
Yes, I knew that was something, once again, that I could control.
Yeah.
I just wanted some structure in my life. But I also knew that as I, got older, as I grew up, I saw that my mom was being pulled in 1,000 different directions. She was working 2 full-time jobs. She was trying to stay in contact with my sister and taking care of me. And I mean, I'm sure I ran her ragged everywhere, but
I'm not sure you did. I suppose when the pageant stuff started, that got to
yes,
be. But it's probably a good distraction.
Right.
For her.
Yeah, I was all over the place. Sports, dance, pageants, you name it, I was in it. And so I just wanted structure.
Yeah.
I just wanted something that felt normal. Yeah. And at that age, that's what I thought was normal. But now I realize that normal is not defined by any one word, any one lifestyle. It's different for everybody.
Yeah. So when did you start into the pageant? I don't know anything about Miss Teen and North Carolina and all that kind of stuff. How did that come about? Were you already involved in sports and other things, and that came later, or was that part of growing up? How did that enter into your world?
Well, pageants are definitely a Southern thing.
Yes.
And growing up in North Carolina, that's what my mom did. When I was old enough to step on a stage, she put me in a pageant.
Okay. All right. How old were you in your first pageant?
1.
What?
A baby.
You're
yes.
kidding me.
Those little pageants where they carry you, your mom carries you across the stage. You have to look it up.
Solomon, have you heard of such a 1-year-old pageant?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So right off the bat. And then all the way through.
Well, I took a break when I got about elementary age.
Yeah.
I started dance and I started sports, and I just didn't. I struggled with confidence.
Yeah.
Not the confidence to step into a room and talk to someone, but the confidence to believe in myself. And so I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this. And as I got older, I think I was 12 or 13, someone reached out to me about competing in a local pageant, and I did. And that decision truly did change my life.
Wow.
And so competed for a few years, and at the age of 14, that's when I competed for Miss North Carolina's teen for the first time.
So is that the minimum age to go into?
Yeah, 13 or 14.
13 or 14. Well, tell me about that experience. So is it stressful? It's got to be like, you're just putting yourself out there. What's the Sandra Bullock movie?
Miss Congeniality.
Yeah. So like, talent competition, all kinds of different outfits, interviews.
It's very multifaceted. There's a lot that goes into it.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah. So the competition's a week long, but you prepare for weeks and weeks in advance.
What is it, man? What do you do to prepare?
Okay. So we've got private interview. There's a fitness competition, talent, evening
Fitness
gown.
competition. What do you got to do? Like push-ups and stuff?
Okay, back then, now they've changed it, and it's just kind of a modeling thing. But then we had a whole fitness routine. You had to go on stage, 2 push-ups, jumping jacks, all kinds of things. Yeah. So at the ripe age of 13, I went out there. I had no idea what I was doing. My push-up was awful, but nonetheless, I did do it. And so I think then it was a fun experience. It was very eye-opening for me. I worked hard for sure, but I also saw that there are people out there that are pouring 100% plus some to become the best versions of themselves.
Okay. So when you had your experience with your first Miss Teen I said Miss Teen America.
Miss North Carolina's teen.
Sorry.
Almost there.
I'm terrible. Miss North Carolina teen pageant. You had a moment where you're like, if I really want to do this, I've got to push a little bit harder. I got to prep a little bit more. But you didn't know that till you got around people who were
Right.
pushing. Yeah.
Right.
So it pushed you to be a better version of yourself.
Absolutely.
To some extent.
And like I said, that's the year that I went. My platform was about confidence and being the best version of you. And I realized that I did resonate with that message, but it's so much more than standing on the stage and modeling and all of this prep that goes into your stage presence and how you present yourself. That's all great and that's all fine. But if you don't have that greater purpose and that drive to truly spark change for something that you want to see a difference in, then you can't really push to your fullest potential.
It has to be something beyond just, hey, this would be a cool thing to, it's got to be a passion. This is my purpose. This is what I was built for. And part of your competition is that people want to see that. And they can, I imagine you can tell when someone is just going like, I picked this one out of a magazine or something like that. But no, this is a purpose I have that is, it's something that it's ownership. I live and breathe that. It's everything to me. And so you at 14, you knew that you weren't that platform wasn't quite it.
Yeah, like I said, it was great, but it just.
Well, that's it. I just think at 14, just to know like I'm not quite passionate enough about that. I need something a little bit more.
Well, by that point in my life, I'd realized, I had faced so many different hardships and found a way to dig out of that hole. But I'd also carried a lot of that burden with me. And I don't want anyone to have to feel that way. Right. And so, no, I didn't have it all figured out, but I knew that there was something greater, something that would impact more lives. Yeah. And so that's kind of when I decided to switch over to the Hope Project. And still to this day, I don't have it all figured out. But I think that that's the process that you learn as you grow.
Yeah.
You learn how to better serve people. You learn how to take what you've been through and turn it into something greater.
Yeah. Every
single day.
Beautiful. At 14, 15, you come up with the Hope Project. How did you birth that? How did that become part of an ongoing process of not just, like you said, it's not just for the pageant. It's got to be for you, something that you really believe in and you care about. So tell me about that formation and how it's kind of evolved.
Well, when we got home from the state pageant that year, I told my mom, I said, I want to do something greater. And so we sat down and we started brainstorming, and she's the very think outside the box type of person. So she created the acronym and the name for the Hope Project, which HOPE stands for the heroin and opioid pill epidemic. And I didn't quite grasp all of it at that age. I knew that my sister was battling addiction, and I knew that it wasn't her fault, but it was a disease. But also at that young of an age, it's hard to grasp that whole concept. So it started off as education, and I tried to bring myself up on all the latest statistics, and I talked to my peers, but that still was uncomfortable for me because that's not really something that's talked about in schools anymore either. And it's a very uncomfortable and heavy topic for me at that time to discuss. And so I didn't really know.
At 15, 14.
I didn't really know which avenue to take because, like I said, I come from a small town. So that's not something that parents talk to their children about. That's not something that was discussed in the classroom. It was just a very heavy topic. And I almost thought that by me talking about that, it was going to put me into a category, a stereotypical category that I came from, a family that was broken, a family that didn't have it all together.
Wow.
And parts of me, I didn't want to share that because I was still struggling with that confidence in myself and really sparking a change. And so for a while, and this is blatant honesty, I went through the motions because I was still competing in pageantry, and I was involving myself, and I was doing things that made a change, but it was almost like I was just, waking up every day, checking a box,
Right.
but I wasn't really diving deep into it
So
because
being
I just
completely-
wasn't ready yet.
Yeah. So you and me, real honest. So your mom probably had a lot to do with introducing that idea to you. And then it took you a while to go like, this is something I feel like I can be comfortable having some conversations about.
Right.
Your mom was very passionate about it, and you wanted your mom to feel good about this thing that you're doing. Was that a lot of it at first? Is your mom kind of going like, this is something that is important to me? It took a while for you to kind of wrap your head around it and own it. I mean, I just think it has to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. 110%.
Right.
And, now something that I really strive to do and talk about is breaking the stigma.
Yeah.
And I was a part of that stigma.
Sure.
Because
Well, you're a kid too, though, right?
I remember vividly too at that age, sometimes people would ask me, do you have siblings? And I have 2 older sisters. They're both half sisters. One lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and then Kinsley. At the time, it was kind of unknown where she was. It was hard for me to keep up because she was in and out of recovery. And at this point in my life, I would see her maybe Christmas, holidays. That was about it. And so sometimes I would just avoid that hard conversation.
Wow.
And when people asked me if I had siblings, I'd either one say, yeah, I have a sister. She lives in Tennessee. Or I would say, I don't have any siblings, because I did not want to have to open up the can of worms where I talked about, yes, I have a sister,
Wow.
but this is her story. It was hard. And that's because there was so much stigma surrounding me
Right.
and surrounding that topic.
Were you mad at her?
I mean, it's hard to say no because that would be a lie. I don't know if mad is 110% the word, but angry. I didn't understand
Mm-hmm.
why she was making the decision she was making. But thankfully, now I am educated. And like I said earlier, addiction is not a moral failure.
Yeah.
It's not a decision that we make. People don't make the decision, hey, I want to try this and I want to spend the
You don't
rest
wake
of my
up someday
life.
and say, well, I'd love to be a drug addict.
Yeah, nobody does that.
Mm-hmm.
She made one bad decision.
Yeah.
And it completely changed who she was. And so now looking back, I realized that. But at the time, I didn't.
Right.
And really, honestly, until her passing, that didn't really click to me, because there were some days I thought to myself, I want my sister back. I want to have a normal family. I want to take, family pictures so we can send out a Christmas card. I want to be able to sit down at the dinner table and have a normal dinner, or go have lunch with my sister. Why doesn't she just make the decision to return back to her normal life? But that wasn't something that she was able to do.
And it's probably not something you were able to really wrap your head around
Right.
at that age. And I hope you can give yourself that grace, for crying out loud. That's a lot for a kid to try and function through. So you're going through all of this with your sister, and you're trying to wrap your head around addiction and trying to make sense of all this while you're doing the pageant work, and you're, I think, probably climbing whatever ladder it is. I mean, you're starting to compete on a higher level. You've taken on this hope project, but you're still kind of like, and this is the heart of your adolescence and high school years. I mean, how'd you do it? It must have been madness. It must have been absolute madness, just grappling and wrestling with all of this. And then this is an outsider's point of view, but like the pageantries, you got to have yourself together. You have to be put together. And so it just feels like one of the most tumultuous times of your life that you're being asked to like put your best face out there. How hard was that? And what was your next experience with the pageant? You went from 14 to your first one, and then what was the next one like? And the next one, how was that ladder climbed?
So for the next 2 years, I competed again. And both times at the state competition, well, the second time back, I made the top 15. I was
Oh,
on
wow.
cloud nine. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And like I said, from the year before, I knew that I had to have more purpose and I had to have
Mhm.
more drive. And so I put that work in, but still at, 14, 15,
Sure.
sometimes we think that our hard work is hard work and it's really kind of mediocre work.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I went the next year, made top 15. That was great. And I had the sense of you're making a change, you're
Yeah.
making a difference, not only in yourself, but I was starting to make connections with others and seeing Work Through the Hope Project kind of come to
Mhm.
life. And the next year, COVID hits.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Oh, okay.
the way that this works is you obtain a local title to qualify to go to
Sure.
the state competition. So I won my local title, COVID hits. So now
What
I'm
did they do?
faced with a year and a half of sitting at home,
Oh.
quarantine. And I mean, you think I'm still a teenager.
Yeah.
I still have a life. I, love to spend time with my friends. Now I'm doing school at
Yeah.
home.
That was a nightmare.
And I kind of lost focus.
Okay.
That momentum, it drove down. And when it came time to compete the next year at the state competition, I truly, I didn't really have that
Yeah.
drive. I had lost it. And
You think a lot of
went-
people kind of had lost some momentum going in? I bet you that was just hard for everybody to come back and try to
yeah.
get
Well,
that
and I
thing going
think
again.
too, the year before I'd made top 15. I
Yeah.
was on that high. I was, if you just put in you don't have to put in all the work this year because you made it to where you wanted to
Oh,
get to.
yeah.
So now, if you just put in a little bit of work, you're fine. No problem. And I quickly realized when I returned the next year that that's just not how it works.
Right.
That you have to push yourself as if you just walked away last place, dead last, and you're starting this process all over.
Mhm. And when did you get to that place where you're like, all right, things need to get serious. I want to compete. I want to do better. I
So,
wanna
yeah,
win.
so that year when I left, I told my mom I was done. I didn't want to
Okay.
do that anymore. I was going into my senior year of high school. So I thought I was like 18 going on 35 and
Yeah.
I had it all figured out that just wasn't for me anymore. But in reality, I just wasn't putting 110% of myself there. I'd lost focus of kind of trying to figure out what my purpose was, trying to figure out where I fit
Mhm.
in. And so my senior year of high school, you just said that was one of the hardest,
Sure.
times of my life, 14, 15, 16. But my senior year is when things really started making a change for me. My life was kind of flipped upside down when my dad was incarcerated.
Mhm.
And so that's something that I could have never expected in my life is my father going to prison when I'm, graduating and going off to
Jesus Christ.
college and losing a parent. My mom and I, we relocated to live with my grandmother for a little while. And so once again, my sister's
chaos.
still out there
chaos.
and, I haven't talked to her in years and my mom is still doing her very best to help her to find safe and recovery that is going to truly
Yeah.
help her. And we're also living with my grandma for the longest time. I slept on a cot in her living room. And so
Mm.
I fell back into that cycle of don't let the world know. Don't tell your friends. Put on,
So you're a beauty queen. I mean, you're a beauty queen. Top 15 North Carolina pageant, and you're sleeping on a cot at your grandma's house. Dad's in prison, sister's out using God knows where. And you just have to keep your face smiling, keep people thinking you're just fine. I didn't know about your dad. What kind of relationship did you have with your dad?
So me and my dad have always been close. Him and my mom were going through some relationship issues around the time that he went off to prison. And so that's kind of when things got a little bit rocky. And so he goes off, and me and my mom, moved back home. And then when he returns home, things are just never been the same. But how could they? My
Right.
parents got divorced. And so it was really just like when that happened, it was almost a downward spiral. So I go off to college. My dad comes back home. I do have a home to go back to now, but it's not the same as what I, had grown up
Sure.
used to. It's not. And so then my dad's adjusting to a new life. My mom's adjusting to me being going off to college. She's, in my lifetime, I've never, gone away.
Oh.
And so, and then I'm also an 18-year-old trying to adjust to this new lifestyle. College is supposed to be the, best time of your life. But I went into college with that same mindset that I didn't want to have to burden my mom anymore as well in that space, because
Same as when you were a kid, right?
right.
Yeah.
During high school, I did college classes.
Okay.
So that when I graduated, I had my associate's degree along with my high school diploma, meaning that I could complete my bachelor's degree in 2 years, because now my mom was a single parent on a single income, paying for, all of the things life,
She's
requires
amazing.
you to pay. And then also I have to, pay for tuition, and somebody's got to pay for gas. Somebody's got to pay for food. And so I have been blessed with the absolute best mother out there, and she has provided for me.
Figured it out.
Yeah. But I wanted to take that burden off of her. I didn't want to have to, cause my mom to pay 4 years worth of tuition when I could do it in 2 years. And so I took that by the reins, and I go off to college the second year that I was at NC State. So this was last year. I was home for Christmas break, and about 5 days before Christmas, my dad's mother passed away. And that day she was older, and so it was kind of a loss that I expected coming, but the timing of it, at the time I was like, Christmas time, this is not great. I loved my grandmother. She kept me my whole life. We were very close, and so that was a hard loss. And the day of her funeral, we didn't quite realize, but a couple days later on Christmas Eve, my mom got a call from the emergency department that my sister needed life-changing decisions made, that she was in the ER unconscious, and they just didn't know how much time she had. So I didn't realize the day of my grandmother's funeral that my sister was being rushed into the emergency department at the hospital, and no one knew. She was sent off in the EMS. Nobody went with her. Nobody contacted us. And so Christmas Eve, my mom takes off. The rest of my family takes off. And we don't have a big family. Let me preface that. So when 4 of them leave, it's kind of like, here I am left. There's not many of us. And so that Christmas I spent by myself while my mom, my grandma, and my aunt were taking care of my sister. And this is the first we had seen of her in forever.
What was your understanding at that time of your sister's condition? Like, what did you understand about that?
I really didn't understand a lot of it. I knew that she was back in North Carolina, which in my head gave me a sense of peace, because I was like, okay, if she's back and she's not in recovery and she's got a roof over her head, then she's fine. But the reality of that was she was staying in a motel, and she did have a job, and she was trying to take steps to get her life back in the right direction, but she was still surrounded by people that weren't. And so she ended up back in the hospital, and I didn't quite grasp any of it. I just knew that it was very, very bad. And she had a infection that had basically taken over her entire body. And they were there, I think it was from Christmas Eve until the beginning of February. The
Wow.
doctors,
Wow.
the doctors were able to go in and, I mean, this was a miraculous comeback. She left the hospital and
Wow.
doctors expected her to never leave. This is not something that, if you and I went to the hospital, they would probably tell us we weren't going to make it. And her body
She
has withstood so much over the past
Right.
15 years, but she made it
She
out.
bounced back from it. Yeah.
And she came home, and that's the first time that she had been in our house in 5-6 years.
When was the last time you had seen her?
The last time I had seen her was about 5 years before,
Wow.
2018.
So when she comes back into the house and you're reconnecting with her, what were some of the feelings? What were you going through reconnecting with your sister?
It was hard
Yeah.
because that's not the sister that I remembered. Physical appearance was completely different, and it was almost scary for me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to the hospital when she was in the hospital
Right.
because I did talk to her over the phone, but I just didn't feel that I could handle that because I'd pushed that burden to the back, shoved it under the rug for so long. I just didn't know if I could handle that. And the memories that I clinged on to were the ones that I remembered of me and my sister when I was a kid at 5
Mhm.
years old, in the backyard playing, or her going with my mom to pick me up from school. It wasn't the memories of
So this person's almost unrecognizable.
right.
Yeah.
And so she comes back home, and this was a very short-lived time for her back at home. But I remember, this is a crazy thing, but one of my favorite foods is hot dogs, and that's hers too. And so I remember one night we got up, it was like 11 o'clock, and she got up off the couch and she was making a hot dog. And I was like, "Can you make me one too?" And we sat down,
Mhm.
and for a moment I felt like I had my sister back.
Yeah.
But she was so sick, and this disease had not only taken over her body, but her brain as well, that it didn't take long,
She's going through withdrawals, I imagine.
right, to go through those withdrawals. And the reality is our world just does not provide enough resources.
That's
It,
right.
it doesn't. She tried to get into methadone clinics all over, and she couldn't. And like I said earlier, my sister was a fighter. She was
Yeah.
one to face everything head on. And so she said, "I'm just going to go cold turkey.
Wow.
I don't need it." But
People don't understand dope sickness. Like,
no, and they don't. And
torture.
I didn't either,
Yeah.
because it's easy for you and I to say, well, just quit,
Yeah.
just make it through.
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
get through 2 or 3 days, you're fine. But I saw firsthand how much it was taking her over. Honestly, is the most awful visual. I can't even explain it.
Brutal.
But I saw that it wasn't her and her lack of decision making, or her wanting to go back to this lifestyle that has nearly killed her. She has just been given a second chance at life.
How could you want to go back? But,
Right. But
yeah.
that wasn't a decision she could make.
No.
And so time passes. She goes and she lives with my grandma. My grandma's always been kind of her safe haven, and she stayed with my grandma for a couple of months. Things seemed to be going great. And one day, she takes back off to where she was before she went to the hospital. And deep down in my heart, I think that she wanted her things back. I think she wanted to go back and kind of get that last bit of peace. And you have to think, as someone who is in and out of recovery homes, bouncing from place to place to stay, she didn't have anything. All
Just something to connect to.
all she had were her belongings that were
Mhm.
left at the last place she was before she went to the hospital. And so, me and my mom had this conversation the other day. I think she went back to get those things.
Right.
And she stayed there. And it wasn't a couple weeks later, my mom gets another phone call. She was in the emergency department again, and this time it was even worse. And so, I remember it vividly. There's a gas station in front of our neighborhood. I was getting gas, and my mom pulled in. And I thought, what is she doing here? Where is she going? And why did she stop? She had tears in her eyes, and I knew at that moment those same feelings I felt as a kid when I laid in bed and I thought my mom could get up at any minute screaming, crying because my sister's going to die. Addiction is going to take her life. That's what I saw in her at that moment. Because, I felt it. I knew that this was probably the time. And so she told me Kinsley's back in the hospital, and this time I don't really know what the status is, but it's not good. And she never made it out. And that is really, not only did it change my life in a way that now I had lost my sister, but it also opened my eyes to how do you recover from this? Because I almost got a sense of peace that she's no longer here fighting. I don't have to lay in bed and wonder, where is my sister at? Or I don't, have to beg and cry to God to please give me my sister back or make sure she's safe, or lay in bed and wonder, when is this moment going to be? When is this going to happen? Because I'd feared it my whole entire life. But now I knew that she was forever healed. Although it's not the outcome that so many had prayed for and that I'd begged for, it was what God saw fit for her life. She didn't have to suffer anymore. Yeah. She didn't have to sleep in a car. There wasn't the risk of her overdosing and dying somewhere and nobody ever finding her. He at least gave us the sense of peace of knowing she died with my mom laying by her bedside. She was safe, and we know where she is now. And so that's peace that I'm really grounded in.
Yeah.
Because I'm a firm believer that nothing happens by coincidence. Everything happens for a reason. And like I said, we hadn't seen her for so many years. And how much of a blessing is it that we were able to spend those last 6 months of her life with her?
Thank you for sharing that. And I can't imagine what your family has been through. And I think what's hard when you're in the position that you're in as a daughter who is, we already talked about, even as a kid going like, Mom, what I want for Christmas is a chore chart or whatever. That's what I want. Because you want to, what your mom is going through. You've watched her support you go through a divorce, husband in jail, a daughter's addiction for years. I think what's so hard for families sometimes is not that you're suffering, but you're also watching. I think you love your mom probably more than anybody else on the planet, to watch her go through what she went through. As you were doing that, trying to support her, how are you able to get to a place where you could kind of work through your own grief process? Or was that difficult when you're watching your mom go through what she's going through to even focus on what you're feeling? I just think that'd be difficult. Yeah.
Very difficult. Like I said earlier, I'm not a very emotional person, and I think that is a response to everything that life has handed me. Right. I hate being around people that are emotional, and it's not that I'm a very empathetic person. I feel very deeply for others, but it's like a trigger response for me.
Right.
And so I remember the week that my sister passed away, we're planning everything. I can't imagine what my mom's going through. She was, a wreck, but that's to be expected. She's about to bury her child. But I put on the face of what needs to be done. Do I need to make you, we had guests over. Do I need to bring you in? Let me talk to you. Let me find some joy. Let's share a laugh, because for so long I've just pushed everything to the back. And so, it wasn't immediate that I had that instinct that you've got to do something to work through your grief and heal yourself instead of just pushing it to the back, because it's all going to come out at some point. And so some months pass, and luckily this past year, I took a gap year off of school, and I think that was, God's perfect timing for what was going on in my life. But I realized that recovering through my grief wasn't just going to be, sitting down on the couch and breaking down to tears or going to talk to someone. It was really going to be healing and transforming myself.
Yeah.
And that looks different for everyone. But
Sure.
for me, that started kind of a health and wellness journey. And it's not really, I've always been pretty active and thought I ate healthy,
Mhm.
and it sounds so surface level, but really it truly taught me that dedication and finding your purpose through things that you have gone through
Right.
and the pain that you have suffered is the greatest form of self-love
So good.
that you can give yourself.
That's you and I talking outside of that ribbon cutting again, to just saying like how suffering alone seems to be able to unlock that true God-given potential that we have inside of ourselves. That's why I wanted to have you on here, is I've watched that. I've watched, I didn't know all the stuff that you've been through, for crying out loud, but just to know what you've been through and still competing at the level that you've competed in the pageant, and also just like how you are relentlessly pursuing this platform of recovery. It's just been inspiring to watch it. And so we're talking about it, and you're like, yeah, the physical piece of it, the physical training, unlocking that part of ourselves, all of that comes together. Part of our mental wellness. I think you were saying a part of your mental wellness, like almost your therapy.
Yeah,
is
and
to go
I'll
out there.
say, yes, there was a physical transformation, but the biggest transformation for me was mentally.
Yeah, right.
Because I had found something that was not only transforming my body, but also my brain. But a lot of that was dedication. It was
Right.
writing obtainable goals down. It was saying, well, you've fallen into this cycle, and now here's something. And it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Like, you don't achieve greatness by doing nothing.
Right.
So I was like, you're setting yourself apart from the rest of society. You're doing something to better yourself. And I kind of stepped away from some friends. I really focused on me. And what I realized out of that is that's when people started reaching out to me. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, we're so proud of you. Hey, we do see what you're doing.
Right.
And so that's what really sparked, once again, I had someone ask me, do you want to come back and compete for Miss Johnston County? Do you want to come back and compete for this local title to go to Miss North Carolina? And I thought to myself, you have been working so hard in private to heal and to grow. Now it's time. And, like I said, I've seen people that they were seeing the impact. I was having an impact on them without even saying anything, without even reaching out, without putting myself
just
on
to
a,
watch that is inspiring.
And so I was like, now is your time. And I was still struggling. I wanted to do something to be a voice for my sister. And the Hope Project, all those years that I quit pageantry, all those years, it was about 2 or 3, I'd kind of I'd let it fall down the drain. And so I said, now is my time. This is my community. I'm driven. It's going to give me a platform, and I can be the voice for my sister that she cannot be for herself. And so that's when I decided to compete, and it was all just the timing of it. I can't even explain. I woke up one day and I was like, this is my time. This is it. And so I won, and I've had the opportunity to not only represent my community, but I have found my passion, and I have seen that by doing work through the Hope Project and impacting others, even the smallest of impacts, it's healing me like every single day. Because I mentioned earlier, I don't want anyone else to have to, wonder where their sister is at night, or wonder where their daughter is, or wonder if their loved one is going to survive addiction. And so by sharing her story and mine, and fighting for better resources and connecting myself with so many people in so many different areas, from, government relations to you guys at Recovery Alive, to going and sitting down with our county commissioners, putting myself out there, sharing her story, fighting for better resources. That is how I'm making an impact, and it's also healing me at the same time. And that's just really been the biggest joy that I've found in all of this, competition.
It feels like that. Every time I talk to you, it's like the pageant's almost, it's a vehicle for something bigger. And that's for you to be able to not just share about your sister, but for you to be able to grow in this passion and this purpose. And we know 110,000 people last year died of overdose. And we have a pandemic of drugs right now in this world that is very much ignored still. A lot of stigma. And I think that what I have seen be effective in this fight is people who are willing to talk about their own personal experiences. And we see parents who are like, they don't even want to put on cause of death for their children overdose. They'll put, heart attack, or because there's so much shame associated with it, so much like people who are just not willing to have these conversations because just, like you say, you just want to bury it, pretend it didn't happen.
Well, I think that, the biggest things is sometimes drugs aren't the things that are killing people. It's the stigma that surrounds addiction.
That's right.
Until we're able to scratch that, then it's not going to go away. And I think that is the biggest thing that's holding, especially our country, back from making a change is the stigma that's associated with it. And I mentioned earlier, I was a part of that for so long.
Sure.
And I didn't realize it. And I think that by having this platform, I have gone into spaces that people would never expect someone to walk in with a face full of makeup, hair curled, a pretty dress, a crown and a sash.
And a sash.
Yeah, and a sash.
Come on now.
And stand up and talk about a subject as heavy as addiction, and much less to share that my sister battled it and it took her life.
And so inspiring.
That is breaking a barrier, because sometimes people don't realize they're a part of the stigma either. They don't realize that they're contributing to the issue because they just don't hear about it. Nobody talks about it. The only place that we're really hearing about it is on the news every once in a while. And you have to think the media is only going to share the most polarizing parts of this epidemic. And so when I share my story, it might not get immediate response at places that I go. It might not be the most glorified part of the day, but at least I know that people are walking away knowing that addiction is not just affecting the people that are on the street. It's not just affecting the ones that are causing the crime, the homeless. It is our sisters. It is our neighbors. It is the people that we went to school with that were our best friends. And that has been my biggest goal. And by sharing that, I'm also sharing hope. And I will say, once I started just being relentless about this and going into spaces and not being afraid to speak up, that's where I have seen impact.
Yeah. And you said in some healing for yourself as well.
Oh, 110%.
And we said vulnerability, being able to share honestly about our struggles. There is a lot of healing in doing that. And so I appreciate that you're doing this, and I appreciate you being able to say, like, hey, this struggle, the more I talk about it, the more healing I receive. I think people need to hear that. That's a huge part of what Recovery Live is all about, is just getting into a safe space and being able to talk about some of these issues. Even talking about, when you said, like, man, I was part of the stigma, how could you not be? I mean, you're just a kid going through all this, and to be able to have a space where kids can start to, work on their own coping mechanisms and have those honest conversations. Those spaces are really important, in places like Recovery Live, you're going to be sharing at our ministry in a few weeks.
Yeah, August 1st.
It's going to be amazing. Thank you for doing that. But you competing in Miss North Carolina and getting up in front of everybody and talking about this as an issue, the courage it takes to do that. It's not like any other issue, is it? Like when you start talking about it, people get uncomfortable.
Yeah, they do.
It's not the same thing.
They do.
But you being able to do that is making a difference, and we're really, really grateful.
And outside of, just addiction too, I said this in my Miss North Carolina interview, actually. Everyone has a story.
Yeah.
But it's what you do with your story that creates a change. You have a decision. You can either dwell in the things that you see as setbacks or the challenges that you have, or you can take them and you can create something greater.
Yeah.
And from a young age, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to create something better for myself.
Mm-hmm.
My life was so unstable in so many other different directions. I couldn't control it, but what I could control is what I did with that.
Yeah.
And so, everything that I've done, there's been late nights, early mornings, sacrifices that a lot of people don't see behind the scenes. But you can't expect people to glorify those things. You have to work. You have to, dig through the mud, climb to the top of the mountain, and you have to be willing to use what you've done to create a change. And I think I was just talking to someone the other day. They messaged me and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, this completely random person. She said, I'm in my 30s now, but your story has finally made me realize that I want to get involved and I want to do something. My sister was an addict for half of my life.
Wow.
And now she's no longer here. But I've always kind of just shoved it to the back of, shoved it under the rug. I've never paid much attention to it. Of course, it hurts me, but I've always just never really known what to do about it. And she said, you have inspired me to join the fight. And that is exactly what turning your setbacks into change can do.
How does that feel to get that?
That it honestly, it made every bit of anything that I've ever gone through in my life worth it. And it was just that realization that, for so long I said, I thought that nobody else was going through this kind of situation. I didn't think there was anybody out there that would understand. And for me to, do something seemingly small and share my story and my sister's story, and to have that courage and to have that faith, and now somebody else is going to stand up and share their story. I mean, there really are no words.
Yeah. Our friend Casey Temple says vulnerability is contagious, and we're seeing that happen in your life. So you're about to go off or heading on to, I think your goal is to become an attorney.
Yeah.
And to work on some policy in this area. And you truly are living on Incline as we wrap up. I just see you every day waking up going like, where else can I push? What other challenges can I accept? How far can I go in reaching people who are broken and lost? And like I said, this is what I get really excited about. What I'm really curious about is how do people do that, especially people who have been through the things that you've been through. They just keep getting up.
Well, and like you said, pageantry, it's been great, and standing on stage, that's all wonderful, but it's really just been a path for me to pursue so many other things. It's given me a bigger platform for the Hope Project. But even through that, I've seen that I want to carry this mission even farther. So this fall, I will start law school, and
another mountain to climb.
Another mountain. It's going to be a big one, but we can do it. But my ultimate goal is I want to work in public policy. I want to change the way that addiction is viewed. I want people to know that they are safe in our country, and for our laws to reflect that. And so none of this would have been possible. I don't know that I would ever be here today if I wouldn't have gone through the things that my life has presented me with, because now I want to make that change. I don't want anyone else to go through, these things. But if I'd never seen them, I wouldn't know they were there, and I wouldn't know that I wanted to make a difference.
That's
and
it.
So
that's the secret.
It is.
That's beautiful. Could you tell folks about the Hope Project? How can they contribute? How can they get involved? How can they get connected to the Hope Project?
Yes. So we're growing every day, but you can find us on the web at www.fightforhope.org. And then social media handles is the Hope Project on Facebook and the Hope Project _NC on Instagram.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Get involved with this. Help Grayson out. You're seriously, thank you. It's just an inspiration. And I asked if you'd be real vulnerable in this interview, and you have, which is, it just takes a lot of trust. And I'm just very, very grateful. Thank you so much, Grayson. This is Living on Incline. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks again for joining us on Living on Incline, sponsored by Recovery Life. Would you do us a favor and just hit that subscribe button, share with your friends? And again, we want to explore our full God-given potential and see what we are capable of. So again, hit that subscribe button, and thank you so much for joining us on Living on Incline.